Hey there everyone, I'm Dr.Animaction and welcome to the first episode of what will no doubt be my triumphant return to YouTube. For the first episode, I wanted to hit the ground running, so I chose what may very well be the biggest video topic I could possibly think of, definitively ranking 80s action cartoons. So that's what I'm going to be doing today, and possibly for a couple other days in subsequent videos. Making this is taking forever. Anyway, without further ado, let me introduce the shows that I'm going to be considering for this list. Appearing now in alphabetical order are my choices for the 33 shows that we're going to be looking at. I know it's not an all-inclusive list of 80s action cartoons, but with a couple of exceptions, I think that it's a pretty solid representation of the decade. Right, sorry. Moving on. But how will you rank them? Your opinion means nothing to me, I hear you saying. Fair enough. As an analyst and a teacher in real life, I'm not a big fan of pure unsupported opinion either. It has its place, but I wanted to try and make this list definitive. To do that, I've established some criteria, so let's go over that real quick right now. I'll be scoring each of these shows across 12 different categories that cover the areas I consider fundamental to any creative property, or at least any film, TV, animation property. In each category, I've identified 3 questions to base my score on, so I'll explain my answers to each for all of the shows as we go. Briefly. I'm not trying to Ken Burns this video or anything. So here are the criteria that I'll be doing this ranking based on.
Amongst our weaponry are such diverse elements as
Concept, theme, world building, writing, heroes, villains, animation, acting, representation, the franchise reach, the series run, and the longevity, and I'll explain a little bit more about each of those as we cover them. And now, finally, the definitive ranking of 80s action cartoons. Okay, so let's be honest. There are really only 2 major concepts in 80s action cartoons. They're mostly either X protects Y from Z, or X is caught in a war between Y and Z. I'll go ahead and add a third category called Other here to catch those rare gems that don't fit into one of the 2 that I've already identified. And given those conditions, it's pretty easy to sort most, as in 28 out of the 33 shows we're considering, into one of those 2 categories. And if you don't agree with that, just kind of run down the list. Galaxy Rangers. Cowboys keep space safe from somebody. Battle of the Planets. Superheroes keep Earth safe from aliens. Bionic 6. Bionic superheroes keep Earth safe from some weird doctor guy. On and on. And then there's that second category. GoBots. Humans get caught in a war between the Guardians and the Renegades. Transformers. Humans get caught in a war between the Autobots and the Decepticons. Dinosaucers. Humans get caught in a war between the Dinosaurs and the Tyrannos. And Dino Riders. Well, in that case, it's dinosaurs, but I mean, they still get caught in a war between the Valorians and the Rulons. So what about the 5 that we didn't categorize? Well, you've got Jason the Wheeled Warriors, which is more about a search for some mystical item, rather than it is about just protecting X location. You have Spiral Zone and She-Ra, which are both essentially about militaries that already lost the war, trying to reclaim what was taken from them. You have Thunderbirds 2086, which doesn't even feature enemies or bad guys, but is more about challenging the elements. And then you've got Robotech, which is about one of the last vestiges, or at least the last free vestige of humanity trying to survive against a pursuing Zentradi armada. So given those categories and how the series broke down into each of them, the 3 questions I asked myself about Concept were, at its core, what's the series about, and how cool or fun is the idea? And how original is it? And because most of them not really original, kind of formulaic, which probably one of the things we loved about the 80s, because we were addicted to the formula, but still, for our purposes here, means that we really only need 3, maybe 4 scoring categories. So that's what I've done here. I've broken it down into 4 scoring categories, which, using a highest value wins scoring approach, means that 1 is for anything that kind of just meets the status quo, 2 being anything that's less status quo or less represented, 3 being concepts that are definitely interesting, and 4 being concepts that would be considered unique, at least amongst their peers. And using that logic, I ended up with a breakdown that looks like this. As you can see, even my beloved G.I. Joe only scores 1 point in this because, much like most of the series that we're talking about today, it was just a normal good guys protect Earth from bad guys story. Alternatively, Spiral Zone, She-Ra, and Jace score higher because even though they were good guys versus bad guys, they didn't use the standard conceit of we're just here because there are bad guys here and the bad guys are just here because they're bad. And then Robotech and Thunderbirds take this category because Thunderbirds didn't even need bad guys to get their action across, and because Robotech was way more mature than any of us probably even needed to be watching at that point. So with all that being said, our final scoring for the concept category is as follows, and gives us a final scorecard after one category that looks like this. So much like concept, I've identified what I would consider 7 major themes, or if you prefer genres, I don't care, I'm not an English major, but themes that cover the 33 series that we're talking about in this video, broken down into fantasy, contemporary military sci-fi, military sci-fi, space westerns, mecha, or contemporary fantasy. And then again, just like we did with concept, it's easy enough to break down the majority of those 33 series into one of these 7 categories, which I have done like this. So you may see that in the breakdown that I'm displaying here, there are 31 shows of the 33 that we're talking about represented, with Voltron and Robotech both missing. That's because I actually consider Voltron to be more of a mix of fantasy and mecha, and Robotech to be a mix of military and mecha, rather than purely in one or the other. And yes, I know that same argument can be made for most of the shows on this list, as far as being able to put them across multiple categories, but I feel that for the most part they lean more heavily toward one than the other, and if you feel differently, I'd be happy to discuss it in the comments. In, a civilized manner.
Bunch of savages in this town.
So then again, like I did with concept, I thought of 3 questions to ask myself regarding the theme to base my ranking on, and those questions are, what's the motif? Again, how cool and or fun is it? And again, how original is the idea? So considering those questions and the nature of the world in general during the 80s, I identified contemporary military and fantasy as the 2 most overused themes of the decade, with shows like MASH and the A-Team and the rise of Rambo or the Missing in Action type movies, and also the popularity of Conan and all the subsequent canon films or Roger Corman barbarian movies that came in its wake. So using that to set my base category, I built up from there and came up with this for a ranking. I put space westerns and mecha at the top of my list, even though there had been plenty of movies, like sci-fi movies, that had integrated western type themes and western type settings. Prior to this, there was no real hard space western. Because of them, we ended up getting, shows like Firefly. And then for mecha, with the 80s being the decade that ushered in anime in America, I felt it was pretty significant to have mecha represented way up here at the top of the list. And so transferring those values over to the scorecard, we end up after 2 categories with something that looks like this. And with some of my favorite shows like G.I. Joe, Mask, Silverhawks, Thundercats, all sitting firmly at the bottom of the list right now, I'm seriously rethinking my decision to do this ranking. But nevertheless, in the spirit of a true 80s action hero, I am going to push on. And so the next topic I wanted to cover is world building. Now, when I say world building, what I'm actually going to be considering is the location, the setting, technology, basically the look and the feel. If we were to consider the mythology behind the show, it would be hard to rank them. Their mythologies are all fairly equally developed. So again, for world building, I came up with a few questions, like where is it, how well presented and or described is it, how immersive is it, and I'm just going to consider this to be one of the more subjective of the categories that I'm covering. There will be a lot of room for argument here. Not that I don't expect there's plenty of room for argument in everything else that I've said so far. But my general rule here is going to be the more Earth-like the setting, the more grounded and realistic the technology, the lower the score. So that said, I'm just going to go ahead and pop up the ranking that I put together here for you all to take a look at, and understand that it's primarily driven by those criteria I just mentioned, but a lot of it's probably just my opinion. And so, after 3 categories, our scorecard and our overall numbers look like this. And on that note, I think that this is a good point for me to end part 1 of this ranking. I'll be doing my best to get part 2 together to be uploaded about the same time next week, so I hope that those of you who watch this look forward to that, and I look forward to reading any comments that you may want to post and discussing some of the thoughts I've presented so far further. So thanks everybody for watching, and do all of the YouTube things that YouTube wants you to YouTube, and continue the conversation in the comments. If you want to watch any of the series that we talked about in this ranking and they're still in print, I have Amazon affiliate links to them available below. Picking them up through those would be awesome and really help me out as I try to get this channel up off the ground. And as I used to say, stay tuned and stay tuned. Because, cartoons. And not for 2 years this time. Thanks.